Good evening, everyone. How are you on this Tuesday evening in the Big Apple, the city that never sleeps? That's why it looks like shit in the morning. So, what are we going to talk about? The 70s and the musical transformation that became the 70s. You know, when you look back at the 60s, you had all the great bands that we've come accustomed to hearing about, right, throughout our lives, if you're my age, right? Look, between 1965 and 1975, music shifted from psychedelic pop, the British invasion, Beatles, Stones, in the mid 60s, to diverse genre blending. And it included progressive rock, Floyd, Yes, um, ELP, disco punk, introspective albums, which really defined the cultural change and societal changes, right? So we look from the 60s to 70s in 1965, right? That was the watershed year. Rubber Soul and Revolver moved from pop to experimental rock for the Beatles, Bob Dylan's Electric Turn, and the British Invasion, along with the Beatles, the Stones, the Who, the Kinks. It reshaped American pop. Guitar feedback concept albums, folk rock began to really shape and define sound. By the mid 60s to early 70s, psychedelia took over. Folk rock and the expansion of rock and roll by 68, 69, right? We see the peak of psychedelia. Sergeant Pepper, 67, White Rabbit, Jefferson Airplane's great song, Jimi Hendrix, Purple Haze, the era's counterculture and drug inspired imagery, which was starting to really define who the teens were. Folk rock, Simon and Garfunkel, Crosby, Stills and Nash blended storytelling with rock instrumentation. And by the early 70s, rock diversified into hard rock. Led Zeppelin, biggest band in 1970. They had replaced the Beatles. Deep Purple, Progressive, Pink, Yes, Pink Floyd, and singer-songwriter movements. So by the 70s, a lot of different reasons. FM radio. What happened, the 12-inch vinyl became very big. It wasn't all singles from AM having to be 2 minutes or under. Um, the executives are a lot younger and taking chances now by the early 70s. And you had the cultural idealism from the 60s with the civil rights movement and all that. Uh, really artistic expression, right? Now, you go through the 70s, right? And you look at Joni Mitchell, Carole King, Paul Simon, Elton John, Jackson Brown, Harry Chapin, Cat Stevens, who was very big, 100 million albums sold up until now, Gordon Lightfoot, John Denver, singer-songwriters, which really started telling the story of introspection instead of just societal narratives. In the 70s, progressive and concept became big. Look at Wish You Were Here, Dark Side of the Moon, themes of loss and all that, but very thematic. Stadium rock became big in the 70s. You didn't have that in the 60s. Anthem rock. Queen's A Night at the Opera, Bohemian Rhapsody merged operatic with elements with rock and roll, disco and funk. You had Donna Summer, Love to Love You Baby, and the Bee Gees Jive Talking. Dance music became mainstream. Punk's emergence, the Sex Pistols, Talking Heads, it challenged the rock establishment. And then working class rock, Springsteen's Born to Run, gave the American working class struggles a name. So after the Vietnam War and the counterculture's rise in the 60s, the feminist movement, disco's queer and Afro this decadent cultural expressions, music became a mirror of who the person singing thought the world to be. And their soundscapes started the decade. You went from psychedelic pop in the mid 60s to a multi genre landscape where everything fused and coexisted. Disco coexisted with funk and pop, pump and rock, and it reflected the society and creativity at its peak. So you look at singer-songwriters. Pat Benatar was great, Mitch. And you look at frontmen who were in 60s bands who now became solo artists. McCartney, Lennon, right? You had country becoming a little more popular among non-country fans. Jim Croce, a little bounce to the step. Cat Stevens, introspective. Harry Chapin, storyteller, at the pinnacle when he was killed. And the women who transformed a male world dominated by men. You had the obligatory Joan Baez in the 60s, the woman answer to Bob Dylan. Now you had women that proved that they could talk in a voice that men and women wanted to hear. Carole King, very introspective. James Taylor, right? And most of the songs came from a very deep personal space. And many of those songs became acoustic melodies with an earworm that we can remember. Now, I looked at the 70s as my musical transformation. I became a fan around 1968 when my babysitter, she was 16, I was 7, let me hear I Saw Her Standing There, gave me the 45. I was mesmerized. From there, my mother bought me the Magical Mystery Tour album. I remember sitting in the kitchen. My father would get up early on Saturdays, I guess. And I was up, and Mrs. Robinson was on the radio. I remember Cream. By the time 1971 rolls along, I'm old enough to maybe say, Ma, I want this 45. And I remember at 11 being dropped off at the mall with a couple of friends, and my mother would pick us up in 2 hours. We'd have pizza, we'd go to the record store. American Pie in 1972 came out. I remember buying that 45. I remember at a young age really liking singer-songwriters. Even Have You Never Been Mellow by Olivia Newton-John. At 17 by Janis Ian. It was probably around 1975 or 76. So many singer-songwriters that stood by themselves and opened up your world. And I always thought it was amazing. I remember the song at 17. I remember Melanie's Brand New Key in the early 70s. Once you hit 10 or 11, you start really listening to music. By then, you have a crush on a girl. You have friends that are listening. I had a little transistor radio, listened to ABC. I remember the antenna that came up. Small radio, maybe 5 inches by 3 inches. Used to listen to Ranger and Met games at night on it under my pillow. And ABC. Um, then when I became 14 or 15, I got the boombox. It wasn't stereo. It had the big speaker in the middle, and it took about 8D batteries. And I'd bring it outside, and it had a cassette recorder, and had pause, record and play, press down, and was ready for the song I wanted to cue up. And at that time, I was starting to take guitar lessons. I took drum lessons at 9, too loud for an apartment. So I got my first guitar. My mother and father bought me a Harmony, big, full bodied acoustic. No, I'm sorry, it was an electric. And I took music lessons, guitar lessons. You listen to music differently when you start playing it. All of a sudden, I started taking guitar lessons at about 11. I didn't want to be a singer songwriter because I didn't know what that was. I'm just listening to, oh, that person's a singer. I didn't realize that you could actually write songs because you don't think in those terms until I became a late teen. And I've been playing guitar a few years. And let me see if I can take one of these poems from Mr. Grobstein's English class that I had to write. Let me put it to music and see what I can do. And usually they stink. But you'll come up with something. And all of a sudden, you are the creator. So then you start mimicking voices of the singers you like, maybe the style that they sing in, and the way they write their songs. I remember getting into Paul Simon later on in life, although, like I said, when I was 8 or so, I heard Mrs. Robinson in the kitchen with my father. But I didn't know about Simon and Garfunkel. I remember my father having Here Comes Ryman Simon, his solo album in 73, Loves Me Like a Rock, Kodachrome. And then I remember them getting back in, I think, 75 with My Little Town. I didn't even know they were broken up. But I remember listening to that and it catching something in me. So throughout the 70s, when I'm in my teens, started getting a little confused though. Because just when I thought the singer-songwriter had become big, I'm 14 and I hear Sky High by Jigsaw on the radio. Rock the Boat. The Hustle. And you're 14 and you're starting to like girls. That is, quick music's good too. And then Saturday Night Fever comes out. Opened up a whole different world at 16 years of age. But I still was listening to the words. If I Can't Have You by Yvonne Elliman. I was one of the few disco people. Hey, Mark. She was gorgeous, Sheena Easton. Hey, Mike. Really? Mike, when they were filming Saturday Night Fever, I guess it was 76, 86th Street and 20th Avenue was where Lenny's Pizza was. And I took the train home that day from Lafayette. And there was a big trailer on the corner. And then when I saw the movie and I see Shirt Town, which was where he threw the $5 in for the shirt, that's where they filmed it. And there was nothing like it. Me and a couple of my friends went to Phillips Dance Studio on Bay Parkway for $2 a lesson and took hustle lessons. Yep. Music had changed, but I was changing. I remember I Can See Clearly Now in 1972. I love that song. I remember the song Happy came out that summer because my friend bought it for me for my 11th birthday, around the same time as I Can See Clearly Now. Then the late 70s punk rock comes around, and I'm getting older. So I didn't know if I didn't think about it then. Now I think about it. Were my tastes changing because I was getting older? Sly Stallone, yeah. Um, all of a sudden, I remember the first kind of newer song I heard was Sultans of Swing by Dire Straits. Really? That's interesting, Mike. Thank you. Um, Dire Straits, and I remember Van Halen doing Pretty Woman around 77 or 78 on their album. And You Really Got Me. Unbelievable versions. Then I got into the Police, Joe Jackson, Elvis Costello. I remember the summer of 79, My Sharona came out. That was the biggest song of that summer. But that decade, the singer songwriter really did me in. And the singer songwriter was the reason I became a songwriter and ultimately played in a band and traveled. Because for me, it was you're able to express yourself and no one really knows if it's you. I could be just writing a song about someone brokenhearted. They don't know it's a girl that I've been longing for that's with someone else. I'm just writing a song. You can get away with a lot when you're a songwriter, and it's very cathartic. It's your own private shrink. The only difference is you're listening to you because you're singing the words and it's you talking back to yourself. And I always thought that was amazing. But the singer songwriter will never die because there are always people that just want to tear up because of a memory. And they don't want to hear Donna Summer's version of MacArthur Park to do it. They want to hear Seals and Crofts' Summer Breeze. Um, Love is the Answer, which I never knew Todd Rundgren wrote that song with Utopia. England Dan and John Ford. But, when I look at songwriting now, it's a very individual artistic expression. You own it because you're giving birth to it. And there are a lot of songs that I wrote 40 years ago that I can't stand now. I would have swore they were amazing when I did them. But we get older. I'd like to say wiser. Cats in the Cradle. I love that song back then. Now it means something different because I remember when my father said, "You'll see one day," and he was right when my son asked me for the keys when he was 18. And then I was trying to talk to him and he was running out the door. You better make sure you have time for your kids because one day I can guarantee you they will appear at least not to have the time for you. And my son always has time for me. Mike, Todd Rundgren was wonderful. He raised Steven Tyler's daughter. He's a good guy, Todd Rundgren. I've seen him many times with Ringo's band. Good guitarist, very underrated guitarist, Todd Rundgren. But he's terrific. He really is good. Do you ever hear him sing Love is the Answer? I mean, he makes it his own. He truly does. He like sings it incredibly. And I don't think many people know he wrote that. I didn't until I was like 55 years old. And by chance, I heard him do it with the Ringo Band. And I said, I wonder why he did that. When I looked it up, he wrote it. That's why. Yeah. He was hit on the Long Island Expressway, I think. But he was great. I'm going to lose my advertising for this show, but I really don't care because it means more to me to be on here with you. I don't need the dollar that bad. But I just have to let you hear a little of this. Let me see. It's just incredible how he does it. I'll get to the. Okay. You have to watch this part. You're gonna love it. Listen to this. Just the way he owns it. Sing, 'cause when you feel afraid to sing, when you lost your way singing, when you're all alone, when you fall from home. Okay, listen to this now. When you're down and out, for your home's alive. Right here. Guitar run. Yeah, Harry Chapin. How are you, Harry? Remember that song? I remember when that came out. I remember when Cats in the Cradle. What a wonderful song. There's something about a singer-songwriter. And look, I think Carole King is amazing. I think she's wonderful. I think Carly Simon is amazing. Like Carole King was the Joan Baez of the 70s. And then you had Gordon Lightfoot. People love Gordon Lightfoot. He was great. A real storyteller. And he had to be on FM because his songs were 7 minutes long. James Taylor was great. Jackson Brown. But telling a story and putting music to it is almost like reliving it. Because when you're writing, the repetitive motion of that memory to get it down correctly is like you're almost sorting it out in your mind. You're coming up with the answers. It's therapy. So the 70s and the musical transformation. Well, it transferred me from a teen to the 80s going into adulthood. Some will argue I haven't gotten there yet. But the singer-songwriter, I think, is a stepping stone for you to understand what music's about. Because it's more simplistic. Generally speaking, a singer-songwriter, you don't have the wall of sound by Phil Spector behind it. And then you graduate more instrumentation. And I get what they're trying to do there. But in the beginning, all he was trying to do was just tell a story, or she was. So the 70s and the musical transformation. It transformed my life, and I'm sure it transformed yours. Oh, that is an amazing song. That's like reading a novel. You get through with that song, it almost counts as reading a book. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. I really do appreciate it. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.